Well, it's good to have you here today. We are in part 3 of this series this morning, but before we begin, I'll just say this again. If it's your first time here, we're so glad that you have joined us today, and we're excited that you're here. As I said, we're entering into the Easter season, and our mission here is simply to guide you into a forward-moving relationship with Jesus. We think that's really important, and if you're here and you're like, I'm not all that sure about the Jesus thing, then you still belong here. What I love about Jesus when he encounters people in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew and Mark is that many times when he sits with people, it's usually with people who are skeptical of him. They're saying, I'm not so sure about you. I'm not sure if I really want to be part of this. And so I'll just say to you, you're welcome to be here. We're glad that you're here. That's why we want you here. And we just hope that it moves you forward in your life, this conversation that we're about to have today. And so, part of moving forward, we believe, is baptism. Listen, if you've made a decision for Jesus over the course of the last year, we would love for you to just acknowledge that in front of our community here at the table. It's just a public way of acknowledging that Jesus has changed your life. And so we'll be doing that on Easter Sunday. And so we'd love for you to sign up. You can do that with the card in front of you. Or on your way out, you can go to our Next Steps table and sign up there. So, as I said, we are in week 3 of the series, Can't We All Just Get Along? And that's kind of like a rhetorical question. It's like a rhetorical title. You already know the answer to it. Because you have a lot of people in your life, you have relationships in your life that are really hard. Because people are messy. And people are really hard. That's just the truth. And so we're doing this series because we want it to help you. We want it to better the relationships that you have. We want to make you, as we've been saying, relationship wise. Relationship wise. And so often we think and we approach our relationships in this way, that it's about intelligence, it's about how smart we are, it's about how great our brains are, and then when our relationships don't work out, we have big questions. And so really the question about wisdom, if we look at the ancient word of wisdom, what is interesting about it is it means this. It means skill. And it means this question of, are you willing to work for it? Wisdom is not about how smart you, as we said. It's this question of, in your relationships, to be relationship wise. Are you willing to work for it? Because here's what wisdom is. It's a skill. Wisdom is a skill that's developed, not inherited. We've been saying this over the last few weeks, that wisdom is a skill that's developed, not inherited. Meaning you did not come out of your mother's womb knowing how to have great relationships. You are not natural at this. And so it takes work. You ever hear people say, we have to work at our marriage? Yeah, well, it's not just true about marriage. It's true about people that you work with. It's true about your kids. It's true about students that you go to school with. Like, you have to work at it. And so I don't have time to recap over the last couple weeks where we've been. If you missed last week, it entailed a gasoline can and some matches. That was so much fun. But if you missed that, you can go back and watch it online or find it on our podcast. So here's where we're headed today. This is so much fun. A story about building, rubber bands, and magic erasers. Rubber bands and magic erasers. It's going to cost you breaking it down and building it up. Breaking it down and building it up. And so today I want to read this story or these words from Jesus over your life this morning, and it's found in Luke's account of Jesus' life. If you don't know who Luke was like you and me. He was just an average, everyday Joe Schmo who quit his job and decided to find out if Jesus was legit. And so many times we find Luke sitting around tables talking to people, and I think it's why we find Jesus in Luke's gospel sitting around talking to people at tables. That's why the table is so important, because this is where Luke finds Jesus. It's where we often find Jesus talking with people. So this morning I'm going to read this story, these words of Jesus. And in addition to that, I'm going to read our theme verse from James. So would you stand with me this morning as we read together? The reason why we start with God's word is because we believe that it's important, we believe that it changes lives, and we believe that it has power to shape who we are. I like to say this: if you want to know what God is like, just look at the life of Jesus. If you want to know how God interacts with you and me, this is why I follow Jesus. I'll just be honest. If Jesus didn't exist, I would not follow God. Bottom line. Bottom line, I would not follow God. And so this is why I love these words. He says this: suppose one of you wants to build a tower. One of you wants to build a project. We might just say, what if one of you wants to build a relationship? Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough? Won't you estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everybody is going to laugh at you and say, hey, this gooberhead couldn't finish it. If everyone sees this, they're going to ridicule you. They're going to make fun of you. What a nincompoop. This person began to build and wasn't able to finish. And then he says this: or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he's not able to do so, will he not send a delegation while the others are still a long way off and ask for terms of peace? In the same way, those of you who give up everything you have can follow me. And those of you who choose not to give up everything that you have cannot follow me. You cannot be my disciple. Now, I know when we hear these words, we often think in terms of like, you hear people say, I gave up my house, I gave up my kids, I gave up my family, I gave up my car and I became a missionary. And like, whoa, I could never do that. What if in this moment Jesus is talking about just giving up you? You see, in order to build something, you have to let go of yourself. And then our verse for the series goes like this, James 3:17. But the wisdom that comes from heaven, we've said that only wisdom can come from God. The wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. It's peace-loving. And here's today's word. It's considerate. It's considerate. It's full of mercy. It's submissive. It has good fruit. It's impartial. And it's sincere. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this opportunity to teach today. I pray that you would be in this time. I pray that you would be in my words. I pray that your spirit would empower me in this moment. I pray that our ears would be open. Our hearts would be changed. And we would think differently about how we experience life today. In Jesus' name, amen. I've entitled today's message, Consider the Cost, and on your way down, say to your partner, you know I'm right. You know I'm right. You know I'm right. That's right. You know I'm right. I feel like I'm going to school today. I have all these things on my desk up here, and half of them I'm not sure why, but we'll figure it out as we go. Sound good? The other day, I was in a meeting with our teaching team, with school and COVID and all the inconveniences of how that all works. A lot of my meetings happen at my house. And so the other day we were meeting, our preaching team was meeting together, and we were talking about the series, and I knew that my boys were going to come home, and they'd be really excited to see people in the house because, that's been a while since that happened, and so they'd be really stoked. And I knew it, we just have to give them direction. So military mind took over quickly, and no, I wasn't barking orders at them. I don't treat my kids like that. But it's just like, they get off the bus, I'm like, we need to give them some direction. So I said, guys, hang your coats up, go to the kitchen, grab a snack, go to your bedroom, you have a half an hour of video games, and then you need to either clean your bedrooms or do your homework. Pretty clear, huh? And they were great. They were great. They went back to the rooms. They grabbed their iPads. They grabbed whatever video games they wanted, and they were ready to clean their rooms before they were even ready to, play games. Great kids. And as I was getting ready to leave, one of my sons looked at me and he said, "Dad, I had a really bad day." Now, in our house, we don't have bad days very often. We get grumpy on occasion. It's a so-so day, not a great day. But he said, "I had a really bad day." And I could tell that he wanted to talk, and so I sent my other little guy to the other room, and I shut the door, and he sat on my lap, and it was one of those, you know when you've been upset and you've been crying and you can't catch a breath? It was like one of those moments. It was like, like you couldn't get the words out. And he's sitting on my lap, and I'm like in tears, like, what in the world? I've never seen this before. And so he explains the events of the day. He tells me that he was in the middle of some state testing or some whatever testing that they have to do for school. And he said, the teacher decided to leave the room. And apparently, there was a kid who was stockpiling rubber bands over the entire semester. And he said when the teacher left the room, this kid, that's what I call him today, this kid, that's not what I call him at home, I call him something else, but this kid decided that he was going to unload his arsenal of rubber bands when the teacher left the room. And it just happened to be at my son. So, I'm like, okay, kids will be kids. That's funny. It's kind of funny, So I said, well, tell me about it. What happened? And he went on to tell me. He said, we just kept shooting me, and people were laughing. And I said, well, how many rubber bands did he shoot at you? And he said, 40. I thought maybe we were like 1 or 2. 40. And so I was like, oh, okay, so what'd you do? What'd you do in this moment? And he said, well, I just picked him up, I tore him in half, and I threw him in the trash. And then he said, but look at my neck. And then he turns around, and he has this huge welt on the back of his neck. Let me just pause here for a minute. They tell me in the Enneagram I'm like a 7 or an 8. If you don't know what Enneagram is, it's like some crazy test that you take, and they put you in a box and tell you your personality type. Apparently, if I'm an 8, I'm really big on making things right. I don't like when things are unfair. I don't like when things are unjust, and I want to make things right. In this moment, I wanted to make things right. I was like, man, this teacher better get a hold of that student. These parents better take care of their kid, or I will do it for them. And if they have a problem, I'll take care of them too. And if you're listening, no, I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. You can find me I'm just kidding. But I was so mad. I was so mad in this situation. Because I wanted to be right. I wanted it to be made right. And so can I just ask you a question this morning? How many times in your life would you rather be right than considerate? How many times in your life would you rather be right than considerate? I get it, parents in here, teenagers in here. Some of you have kids. I don't mean teenagers have kids. I'm kind of trying to lump students and teenagers together. But sometimes people pick on your kids, or sometimes they pick on you at school. I get it. Social media, like we tell our kids, you think you want a phone? You think rubber bands are bad? Wait till you get social media, son. Like, so you get bullied on social media? Listen, I would rather be right than considerate. When somebody says something about you that isn't true, you would rather be right than considerate. When you go to work and you are the one who is behind the project, you are the one who's put this whole thing together, you are the brains, and your manager goes to your boss and is like, look what I did. You would rather be right. I would rather be right than considerate. Listen, somebody's hurt you in life, you have every right to hold a grudge against them. You could be right. Then consider it. I just want to talk in our own circles for just a minute. In church world, we have buzzwords that create a lot of tension. Like creation. Can I just say that word? Creation. And if you're like, what's he talking about? Don't worry, we're not talking about it. Don't worry about it. Totally different thing. But sometimes in church, we have different views of how the world was created. And even though we have different views, right, you can just, even when I say it, you can just feel it sort of well up inside. Like everybody has a different thought about how it happens. But here's the thing. A lot of us would rather be right than considerate. This is why there are over 30,000 denominations and organizations. Is because people would rather be right than considerate. And so here's what I want us to understand. This is kind of the base for where we're going today, because I don't think many of us get this, but being correct over considerate is going to cost you. This is so important, that being correct over considerate will cost you. You take a picture of this, take it home with you, set it on your steering wheel, put it in your mirror. This is so important, because when you are correct over considerate, it's going to cost you something. And so I want to talk about that this morning, because I think it's so good here. And I love this, that, let me find my notes. I am lost in my notes today. Can you believe this? That's why. I want to say this, that the reason why Jesus talks about estimating the cost is because when we build relationships and we're always correct, it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. And so here's what Jesus says. Let's go back to the gospel real quick. Let's talk about this real quick. He says this, won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough? Won't you estimate the cost to see if you have enough? Do you remember the pastor I was talking about last week who told me, do you carry a bucket of water or a barrel of gasoline? This pastor also would come into my office. And he would sit down and he'd ask me about my week. Who do you have to talk to? Who do you have to meet with? What conversations do you have? And a lot of times he would say this to me, do you have enough pocket change for that conversation? Like maybe there was somebody I needed to ask something from them, or maybe there was something that, like it was a touchy subject and he would ask me, do you have enough pocket change for that conversation? Like this is what Jesus is getting at when he says estimate the cost. It literally means to count your pebbles. It's not like I maybe have enough. I like estimate as guesstimate. That's how I see it. But when Jesus says estimate, he's like, no, bro, you need to count your pebbles. You need to count them one by one to make sure that you have enough. In fact, I'm going to dump my change out here today because this is so good. Got to make sure I have enough. And so he would ask me this question, do you have enough pocket change? Because he was saying to me, you may have a relationship with them, you may have a connection with them, but if you're going to be correct, if you're going to be right in this moment, you better know it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you something. And you better hope that you have enough. In fact, I got to be honest, I loved it. There were times where he'd say, can I have that conversation for you? Because I have enough change in my pocket that I know them well enough that when I go and talk to them, I can spend it all and everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. Because if you don't have enough, and here's the thing, when we are always right, it has the ability, this is so important, being right has the ability to break down our relationships over time. Always, I'm not saying that you can't be right. I'm saying that always being right has the ability to break down your relationships over time. And this is so important. Can I go back to my son's story for just a minute? He could have been right, but it was going to cost him something. I mean, if he came home to me and said, Dad, out of the 40 rubber bands that kid shot at me, I took one and I shot it back at him, I'd be like, bro, you're right. You should have done that. Great idea. Did you hit him in the face? Did you knock him out? Did he get a welt? But here's the thing, like, he does that. If he's going to be right in that moment, I'm going to pretend I pull it out of my pocket, right? He has to spend some change, right? And at the end of the day, when he drops that coin in, what he's doing is everybody knows this is not his character. This is not the kid that we know in the classroom. His teacher's saying, I don't know who this is. He would never do something like that. So he's got to spend some change. He could lecture all the kids on the dangers of shooting rubber bands in people's faces. He could be right. But if he's right, it's going to cost him, right? It's going to cost him because nobody wants a know-it-all in their classroom, and nobody wants somebody who pretends to be like the teacher. He could have told the teacher. That would have been the right thing to do. In fact, when he got home, he said, why didn't you tell your teacher? Other than the fact that she wasn't in the room. Why didn't you tell your teacher? Because he knew, right? If I'm going to be right, if I'm going to tell my teacher, it was right for me to tell the teacher, it's going to cost me. Because when that kid gets a detention, like, he knows who told on him. He knows who told on him. What about you? Listen, I know that your views on politics and government are right. Sorry, can we just ease the moment for a second? But can I just say this? If you're going to get in a conversation with somebody about your views on politics and government, or you're going to make a post about your thoughts on government and politics and all that kind of stuff, can I just say this? Not everybody shares. Like, I hate it having conversations with people and they just assume that I share the same position they do. And it annoys me so much. But guess what it does? Guess what it does? If I'm going to be right, if I'm going to share my views, you may have the right understanding. You probably should be the POTUS. But it's going to cost you. That you should consider the cost, and it's going to cost you in that moment. I think about your spouse for a minute, or think about people that you're dating. Like, if you are always right, you better consider the cost. If you're fighting about what cleaning products to use on the house, how to make the bed, how to parent your kids, what restaurant we're going to go to, if you are always right, you probably should consider the cost. Because it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. If you think your boss is a gooberhead and an idiot and a nincompoop, if you think that your boss is like, I know better than them, and you probably should be running the business, just like you should be the president. You should be running the business. You can be right. You may have the best projects, but guess what? You should consider the cost. Because it's always going to cost you. Listen, the grudge that you hold against somebody, you know the person that really has just dug down deep into your life and they've made it horrible for you and you keep hanging on to it and you don't let go of it. Listen, that's fine. You can be right. But you should what? Consider the cost. Because it's going to cost you something. When you're with your kids, and they're just trying to share their deepest fears and their struggles, and you have all the answers for them. Oh, you could be right. But guess what? It's going to cost you, especially when you don't listen. And I'm making a point. I make the distinction here, right? That every time, actually, I did it completely backwards. Can we do this? Here, let's do this. There we go. That's what I meant to do. Now we'll make the point, right? Every time that you do this, it costs you something. And the point is this: it's all about you. Like, being right is all about you. Being right is about making you feel good in the moment. Being right has nothing to do with them, and it has nothing to do with helping the relationship, but this is so important. Like, notice, you can't see it in here, but notice what you have left. You have nothing. Every time that you have to be right and it makes you feel better about, the whole thing, I'm just letting you know, you have to spend some change, you have to spend some pocket change in order to get that place, but you eventually will run out. And when you run out of change, this is what happens. You have nothing left between the two of you. You have nothing left with that coworker. You have nothing left with that other student. You have nothing left with your spouse. It's empty. It's absolutely empty. And so I want to consider this question. This is so important. At the table, we'd love to ask questions. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to talk about it. We're going to sing a song, and then we're going to end this thing out in a great way. I want to help you today. I want to help myself today. But consider this. You can take notes on this. You can talk to somebody next to you. You can text somebody if you're like, I don't talk to people. We're cool with that too. Consider the cost of being right. Talk about this for a minute. If you are always right, how do you feel that impacts your relationship with other people? If you are around people who are always right, what's it like to be on the other end? Not fun. That's the answer. Not fun. So how does this impact your relationship? When people are always right or when you are always correct? Overconsider it. How does it impact the relationships you have? Talk about that for a minute. We'll sing a song. We'll come back and finish this out. So up to this point, we've been working with this idea. We've identified the problem, and that is this, that often when we are correct, overconsider it, it's cost us something. When we want to be right or we need to be right, it actually is all about me. It has nothing to do with them. And so we said this, that over time, the more you are right, the more that it breaks down those important connections and relationships that you have with people. If you want to know, while your relationship is a disaster, there is a good chance that both of you may struggle with being right. So, what do we do? How do we rectify the situation? How do we correct it? I want to end it. Can I end it? We're close to our ending. That's good. Can I end it with this? My son's story. So he got hit with rubber bands. Dad got really upset about the rubber bands. He could have been right about the rubber bands, but here's what happened. The next day he comes home and he walks through the door and it was like a complete difference. It was like, Dad, I had the most amazing day ever. And I said, well, what happened? Let me guess, you shot Rubber Band Boy in the face. Yeah. No, Dad, that's not what I did. I'm usually corrected by my kids. The other day we were driving somewhere and they're like, Dad, that's not very nice. I'm like, you're right. It wasn't nice, but it was funny. They were not laughing. They're like, Dad, that's not funny. And I'm like, you're right. It's not funny. It's not funny. So I said, tell me about your date. What happened? Tell me what happened with Rubber Band Boy. He said, well, and let me just preface it with this. In our conversation the previous day, when we were sitting down and talking with one another, we said last week we have this rule in our house. You can say what you want to say, but you will not say it how you want to say it. My other rule is this in the house. We always use the path of least resistance. We talk about that in our house all the time. We always use the path of least resistance. Meaning this, that when we look at the life of Jesus, he always uses the path of least resistance, which leads to peace. It is nonviolent peace. That's a whole nother sermon for a whole nother day. So we always talk to our kids about what do we do when somebody puts their hands on us or they're name calling us or shooting us in the face with rubber bands. What do we do? And of course, we're trying to talk to them about how to keep the peace. But he comes home and he says, today when I was at school, we were in the middle of class and I noticed that Rubber Band Boy needed help. Now, let me just say this. You can be peaceful and not do anything about it. I said, did you ignore him? Well, Dad, I decided in that moment that I would share my brand new eraser. And I thought, man, from rubber bands to magic erasers. From rubber bands to magic erasers. Now, I know that he didn't quite understand the severity or the depth of the moment. I mean, erasers, it was like he was erasing the slate clean and saying, man, I don't care that you shot me with 40 rubber bands today. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you in this moment. And in that particular moment, he didn't choose peace. Peace could have been, I'll just ignore and pretend like nothing's going on over there. Peace could be, I'm just staying in my own lane. Like peace is just walking away. But kindness, we didn't talk about kindness. Some days I don't like kindness. Kindness never wins, ever. And I think that's how we feel. Like kindness is viewed as weak. It's viewed as people who never win fights. Kindness is like what the people who don't know how to handle themselves do. It's what the runts do. Kindness. Man, when Jesus says kids are the kingdom, you want to know what heaven looks like? Just look at your kids. My goodness, every single day is a new lesson for me. Oh, I get it. My kids aren't perfect. They beat each other up too. The whole nonviolence thing, they do it every day. They beat each other up all the time, and we have to have the conversation again. But here's what I want you to understand. Just like I said, being right is going to cost you something. Oh, being kind costs you something. It costs you something. Listen, when we decide that we want to help somebody with their magic erasers, it costs me my pride. It costs me my ego. When your boss takes credit for something that you came up with, I get it. It is so hard in that moment to say, man, you're right. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even be here today. It cost you something to be kind in that moment. Like when your kids come home and they keep talking to you and it seems like it's the same story over and over again, but you take the moment to listen to them and it's really hard because you've heard this story 20 times. It costs you something. It costs you patience. It costs you your own ears from burning off, right? When people keep bullying you through social media or they keep shooting rubber bands at you when the teacher's gone, where in the world's the teacher? It costs you something. Kindness is going to cost you. It's like against everything that you believe to be in your soul in that moment. But the moment you do it, it is a game changer. You know why? Because every time that you put in a new penny, you estimate the cost. Guess what? You are still full. You always have enough to go around. This is a metaphor for your relationships. When you are kind, you literally just keep dumping and dumping pebbles and coins. You're counting and estimating the cost, but you will never run out. Some of the people who have the best relationships in my life are the people who know how to be kind before they are right. And I look around them and people love them. They love them. I know people in their life who I can't stand them, and I'm thinking to myself, how do you like them? It's because they're kind. It's because they're kind. And I know that seems like just such a simple answer, but I want to go back to what Dr. Dyer says, and we put it on your kind part of today. Isn't this so good? When given the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind. I get that this is not groundbreaking news to you. What's groundbreaking is you walking out of here and doing it. I love it. I got a text message last week. It said, Pastor, it's time to implement. You want to tell me a good message? Oh, that's fine. I don't really care. I mean, yeah, I do. But what means more to me is when somebody says, today I'm doing this. Today I'm doing this. Today I'm choosing to be kind over right. Turn to your partner and say, I kind of like that idea. I kind of like that idea. That's a good idea. It's a good idea, and here's why. Here's why. Because when you're right, it breaks the relationship, but when you are kind, it always builds the relationship. I kind of like that idea. Here's what I want you to know today. Here's the takeaway. The takeaway is this, is that people who are relationship wise, not smart, not intelligent, people who are willing to work for it, people who are relationship wise are more concerned with being kind than being right. And why is that important? Because kindness always builds. Kindness always builds. Kindness always builds. I hope when you leave today, you can just say that. Kindness always builds. When you need to be right, when you need to be correct, kindness is going to win. When I don't want to lose the person that is important to me, can I just say, kindness will always win. It will cost you your humility. It will cost you your ego. It will cost you your pride. But you will always win when you are kind. And so, because you're so studious, you're asking me, Brad, how do we do that? Help me practice being kind. All right. You were saying, why did you give us these kind bars? Here's what I like to do. When I'm really upset, and when I'm really angry about something, when some jerk kid picks on my son, and I get really frustrated, I want to run my mouth, and I want to find his parents, and I want to talk to the teacher, this is what I do. No, I don't like to eat when I get upset. But it's probably pretty good for me to shut my mouth and just take a minute, collect myself, and pause. This tastes really good, by the way. I'm hungry. Woo. Rule number 1, whenever you feel like you need to just go at it and be right, take the kind bar this week. I hear you. Oh, you're making me angry. Would you quit telling the same story? Take a pause. Use your kind bar, take a pause, shut your mouth for just a few minutes, and process. These 2 questions. How does this help? And who does this help? Do you remember last week when we said the big question was, help me understand? Help me understand. Right? You're asking them a question. Now you just need to internally ask yourself this question. How does this help? And who does this help? This is what kindness asks. Kindness says, in this moment, I could ignore the fact that my good little friend needs help in class, but this helps because if I give him an eraser, what can he say? What can he say? Do you know that's another great marker, by the way, of knowing when you are being kind to somebody, when you are kind to somebody, in return, what can they say? What's the response that they can give? How does this help the situation? What can they say to you? What could that kid say to my son other than, thank you, thank you? How does this help the situation? But more importantly, who does it help? Because when you're right and it costs you, it doesn't help them. But when you're kind and it costs you, it's a game changer. Kindness is always concerned with them. And as long as that's the case, you will always have enough pocket change to go around. So, relationship-wise, is concerned with being kind than being right.